Why did no one ever notice her? For 3 years she poured their drinks with downcast eyes. She smiled when spoken to, bowed when dismissed, and drifted through the smoke and neon haze like a ghost made of patience. The men at the Midnight Lotus thought they knew her, the quiet waitress who never looked anyone in the eye, who moved so silently you'd miss her unless you needed a refill. But what they didn't know was that she noticed everything. And tonight she would be noticed too, though not in the way anyone expected. Rain slicked the narrow alleyways of Shinjuku's Golden Gai district, turning puddles into mirrors for the red and blue signs above. The hum of late-night Tokyo, the muffled laughter, the low bass of a passing car, the soft hiss of falling rain blended into a single, restless rhythm. A rhythm Izumi Katagawa had learned to live inside. She arrived at the back entrance of the bar, shoulders hunched beneath a thin coat, her steps careful, measured. Always measured. The staff door creaked shut behind her. She exhaled softly, as if sealing away the noise of the outside world. Inside, the air was warm with cigarette smoke and faintly sweet with spilled liquor. It was her world, dim, predictable, and full of men who never really looked at her. "You're late," barked Nero, the manager. His voice cut through the room like the edge of a cheap knife. He was a heavy man, thick-necked, always smelling of cigarettes and desperation. He wore a white shirt that strained against his stomach and a tie 2 shades too bright for his suit. 2 minutes, he said, checking his watch for show. 2 minutes that cost me preparation time. Izumi bowed slightly, her tone careful, balanced. Apologies, Nero-san. The trains were delayed because of the rain. He waved her off, already losing interest. Get changed quickly. We've got a full house tonight. She nodded and slipped away toward the cramped staff room. Behind the thin door, 2 other waitresses stood before a mirror, Junko and Erica. Both were younger, louder, and far more comfortable being noticed. Their laughter was sharp, their perfume heavy enough to leave a trail. Izumi closed the door quietly behind her, an invisible presence even in a space barely large enough for 3. Still wearing that nun's habit, Izumi-chan, Junko teased, adjusting the strap of her black dress so it revealed a little more. One day you'll have to show some skin. Customers don't tip ghosts. Erica laughed as she applied a fresh layer of lipstick. She probably earns half what we do on a good night. Izumi smiled gently, the kind of smile that dissolved tension without conceding anything. Some of us don't need to show skin to earn respect, she said softly. They laughed anyway, but she didn't mind. Let them underestimate her. It was safer that way. She turned to the corner, away from their reflections, and began her quiet ritual. The base layer first, a thin, flesh-colored compression shirt covering her from neck to wrist. Then the standard uniform, a black long-sleeved blouse buttoned to the collar, dark slacks, and a waist apron. Her hair, black and smooth, she twisted into a tight bun at the base of her neck, no loose strands, nothing to draw the eye. When she looked at her reflection, even she saw no one special, and that was exactly the point. The Midnight Lotus was no ordinary bar. It was a place where money and silence traded hands in equal measure. The kind of place where a whispered name could ruin someone or save them. Every booth, every corner had stories, unspoken, dangerous ones. She had spent years learning to fade between them like smoke. Tonight the air felt different, heavier somehow. Nero appeared at the door again, straightening his tie like a man trying to look braver than he felt. "Listen up," he said. "We've got very important guests tonight. Himura-san himself is coming." Junko gasped, "The Himura from Kabukicho." Nero nodded. "Ryu Himura, the boss, and when he walks in, you girls keep your heads down. Junko, Erica, VIP section. Izumi, stay out here, main floor only. Don't go near the back. Understand?" "Yes, Nero-san," she said, her tone smooth, her relief buried beneath it. The name Himura struck something deep within her, like a bell tolling from another life, but her face betrayed nothing. The hours passed in a rhythm she knew well. Pour, serve, bow, disappear. The chatter of businessmen, the clink of glass, the laughter that grew louder as inhibitions fell away. Izumi floated through it all, unseen and unremembered, her senses quietly cataloging every detail: the movement of the guards near the door, the subtle shift in music volume when new guests arrived, the way certain men lowered their voices when discussing names that didn't belong in polite conversation. At precisely 9 o'clock, the energy changed. Conversation softened, heads turned. The door opened, and the Himura entourage entered. 5 men in suits, 4 bodyguards, 1 leader. They moved with military precision, every motion deliberate, every step asserting control over the room without needing to raise a voice. Izumi didn't have to look directly to know who he was. Ryu Himura didn't need to command attention. The air simply shifted around him. He was lean, mid-30s, posture unyielding, eyes sharp enough to silence a room. There was no visible jewelry, no loud display of wealth, just authority, quiet and absolute. He didn't look like the kind of man who had to prove power. He was power. Nero practically folded himself in half trying to greet him. "Welcome, Himura-san. We are honored." A simple nod cut him off. Words were unnecessary. The men disappeared into the VIP section behind carved wooden screens, leaving the rest of the bar to resume breathing. Izumi kept her head down, pretending to wipe an already clean table, but she felt his presence like static in the air. Her pulse quickened, not with fear but with something older, recognition. No, that was impossible. She focused on her work, grateful for the safety of routine. But the night refused to remain ordinary. The first hint of trouble came as laughter turned sharp near the door. A group of newcomers entered, loud, expensively dressed, their confidence reeking of entitlement. The Nakamura clan, rivals, even their cologne smelled of arrogance. The bartender muttered under his breath, "2 families, same night, bad luck." Izumi's hand stayed steady, though she felt the tension coil inside her chest. She knew what this kind of night could become, and how quickly it could end in blood. She tried to stay invisible, slipping between tables with silent precision. But invisibility had limits. And someone was watching her. A Himura guard, older, sharp-eyed, face lined by years of violence, paused near the bar, his gaze sweeping the crowd before stopping on her. For a moment, confusion flickered in his eyes, like he was trying to remember a face long buried. She turned away, but not before his brow furrowed. Her sleeve snagged on a bottle as she set down a drink, revealing a sliver of color beneath the cuff, gold and crimson ink on pale skin. A dragon scale. She tugged the sleeve down instantly, heart hammering. The guard's gaze had already moved on, drawn by the rising voices between clans. Still, her breath came shallow. She had lived 3 years avoiding that exact mistake. 1 second of carelessness, 1 glimpse could unravel everything. The Nakamura men were getting drunker, louder. Their taunts floated across the room like sparks over gasoline. One lifted his glass high, voice dripping with mockery. To new territories and old dogs learning new tricks. Every head turned. The Himura guard stiffened. Nero's attempt to laugh it off sounded like a dying cough. Izumi knew that sound too well, the last fragile note before chaos. And chaos came quickly. A shove. A crash. A chair breaking against the floor. The 2 groups collided like thunder. Fists, bottles, screams, customers scattered. Glass shattered across polished wood. Izumi ducked behind the bar, heart racing. Years of silence gone in a heartbeat. She tried to retreat to the kitchen, anywhere away from the violence, but a drunk patron grabbed her arm, panic in his eyes. "Protect me," he slurred, using her like a shield. "They won't hurt a woman." "Let go," she hissed, twisting free. But in the struggle, her shoulder caught the edge of a table. The sound of tearing fabric filled her ears. She froze, looked down, her blouse torn open at the shoulder. And beneath, revealed under the harsh neon light, gold scales glinted against skin. The mark she had hidden for 5 years. the mark that did not belong to a waitress. She pressed her hand to it, desperate to cover the tattoo, but it was too late. From across the room, through the chaos and flying glass, Ryu Himura's eyes found hers. He paused mid-motion, a glass slipping from his hand and shattering at his feet, his face drained of color. Disbelief flickered, then recognition, and finally something close to fear. The room still raged around them, but for her, sound collapsed into silence. His lips moved one word, carried across the storm of noise. Eiko. Her real name. The name she had buried with her past. Her heart pounded in her throat. Every instinct screamed run, but her legs refused to move. The walls seemed to close in, the bar, the men, the ghosts of everything she had left behind. Ryu took one step forward, then another, his security detail trying to shield him from the chaos. That was when instinct returned. She turned and ran through the kitchen doors, past the stunned cooks, into the cold light of stainless steel and safety alarms. Her reflection in the metal surfaces didn't look like Izumi Katagawa anymore. It looked like someone reborn in fire and fear. Her brother had seen her, and the life she built was gone. Behind her, the bar still burned with shouting and violence. But inside her, something else ignited, something that had waited for years in silence. A dragon remembering what it was. How long can someone live two lives before one destroys the other? The kitchen door slammed behind her, muffling the chaos on the other side. Stainless steel counters gleamed under fluorescent light, too bright, too sharp. Izumi, or Eiko, stood motionless for a heartbeat, soaked in spilled whiskey and sweat, her breath coming fast and uneven. The cooks froze mid-motion, eyes wide. "Izumi-san, what's happening out there?" one asked. "Is it a fight?" She nodded vaguely. Words wouldn't come. Her mind was too busy replaying that moment, the glass falling from his hand, the way he'd said her name like a curse and a prayer in one breath. Eiko. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 5 years. She reached for the torn edge of her blouse and pressed it shut, as if she could hide the truth again by sheer will. But the fabric was soaked and ruined, clinging to her skin. Her shoulder throbbed from the impact, but pain was the least of her concerns. There was no going back now. Nero burst through the door, sweating, frantic. "Call the police," he shouted. "They're going to destroy my bar. I don't care who they are, Yakuza or not, someone's paying for this." "The police," she repeated, dazed. For a man like him to even say that word out loud meant panic had finally outrun greed. "Yes, the police, move." He pointed at her without really seeing her, just another employee, another body he could order around. She didn't move. Nero swore under his breath and shoved past her, disappearing again into the noise. Eiko leaned against the counter, her reflection staring back from the stainless surface, pale face, eyes wide with something she hadn't felt in years, fear mixed with fury. The waitress was still there, but beneath her something else was waking. For 5 years she had lived like this, a ghost in plain sight. Every day she'd tied her hair the same, avoided eye contact, erased her own existence one polite bow at a time. She had told herself it was safety. Now it felt like a cage she'd built with her own hands. She moved quickly to the small staff restroom, locking the door behind her. The lock clicked like the closing of a confession booth. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Torn uniform, wet hair clinging to her cheek, her shoulder bared just enough to reveal the edge of gold and crimson, scales and cherry blossoms woven into skin. The tattoo shimmered faintly under the fluorescent light, alive in a way that made her chest tighten. Slowly, with shaking hands, she peeled away the wet shirt. Beneath it, the full image emerged, the golden dragon coiling across her back, the delicate cherry blossoms intertwined with its tail. The mark of the Himura bloodline. Her father's mark. Her mark. She stared at it, breathing hard, memories flooding in, her father's voice guiding her through the ritual the night she received it. the warmth of his hand as he said, "This is not decoration. This is heritage. It is history written on flesh." Eiko closed her eyes. That voice had haunted her dreams since the fire. He had died because of it, because of her. Her disguise had protected her for 5 years, but it had also made her complicit in silence. Now silence was no longer an option. She dressed quickly, buttoning her blouse as best she could, tucking the torn side under her arm to hide the mark again. But it was too late for disguise. Ryu Himura had seen. And he would come. A sharp knock rattled the door. "Izumi," it was Erika's voice, high-pitched, trembling. "They're asking for you." Eiko froze. "Who?" "Those men from the VIP room, Himura's men. They're clearing the bar. Everyone else had to leave." Her heart stuttered. She looked once more into the mirror at the reflection of the woman who had survived a fire, changed her name, erased her past. For 5 years she'd avoided this reckoning, but now it stood outside the door, waiting. "Coming," she whispered and unlocked it. Erika gasped softly when Eiko stepped out. The meek waitress she'd known was gone. Her eyes were sharp now, her posture straight, her voice controlled. Even soaked and bruised, she carried herself like someone who had stopped pretending. "What did you do?" Erika asked, voice breaking. "Why are they looking for you?" Eiko met her gaze with calm certainty. "It's not what I did," she said quietly. "It's who I am." Before Erika could respond, Nero returned, pale and shaking, followed by one of the Himura guards, the older man who had stared at her earlier. His eyes met hers, and something ancient flickered there, memory, disbelief, reverence. "There you are," Nero said, trying to sound authoritative but failing. "Himura-san wants to speak with you, right now." The guard's voice was low, gravel roughened by years of smoke and silence. "Come with me," he said, "and don't be afraid." Eiko nodded, though fear had long since turned into something else, resolve. As they walked through the kitchen, Erika called after her, "Izumi, what's going on?" Eiko paused long enough to glance back, offering a faint smile. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me even when no one else did." Then she followed the guard. The main floor of the Midnight Lotus looked like a crime scene caught in cleanup. Broken glass swept into piles, tables overturned, the scent of spilled alcohol thick in the air. The regular customers were gone, only Himura's men remained, stationed like silent sentinels. And at the center of the room, waiting, stood Ryu Himura. His jacket was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, blood from a cut on his forearm smearing white fabric. Even in disarray, he radiated control, that kind of cold, absolute presence only men born to command could summon. When his eyes found hers again, the world seemed to contract. The guard who'd brought her stopped at a respectful distance. "Himura-san," he said softly, "she's here." "Everyone out," Ryu said. The command was quiet, but it rippled through the room like thunder. Within seconds, the place was empty, except for the two of them and the old guard, who lingered near the door, unsure if he should stay. "Except you, Kazuo," Ryu added. "Stay." Eiko's breath caught. Kazuo, that name. She remembered it, the man who used to guard her father's study, the one who used to watch her train. Kazuo bowed deeply. "As you wish, young master." Ryu took a slow step forward, his expression unreadable. "Eiko," he said again, almost a whisper, "it can't be." Her hands clenched at her sides. "You identified a body," she said, voice steady despite the quiver in her chest. "One burned beyond recognition." "I saw it myself," he said, his tone shifting from disbelief to confusion. "I saw Father die trying to reach you." "You saw what someone wanted you to see," she replied. "You saw what the traitor wanted you to believe." Ryu's jaw tightened. "What are you talking about?" She took a breath, the first step into a truth she had guarded for half a decade. The fire, it wasn't an attack from Nakamura, it came from inside. Someone close to Father, someone close to you. His eyes hardened. You accuse my advisors, my family. I accuse no one, she said calmly. Not yet, but I have proof, and it leads to Masato. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Kazuo shifted, his old bones creaking softly as the implications sank in. Ryu's voice was quiet when he finally spoke. Masato has been with our family for 30 years. Exactly, she replied. Long enough to know every guard rotation, every escape route, every blind corner. He orchestrated the attack to look like a rival's revenge, and you believed it. I needed time to gather proof, to learn who was loyal and who was, so I became no one. Ryu stared at her, disbelief and understanding warring behind his eyes. You hid for 5 years while I hunted ghosts. She met his gaze unflinching, while you hunted the wrong ones. The words hit him like a blow. He turned away, jaw tight, fists clenched. You think I wouldn't have helped you? I didn't know who to trust, she said softly, and you didn't know what had been whispered in your ear. Ryu paced once, then stopped in front of her. Show me, he demanded quietly. Prove who you are. Eiko hesitated, then slowly turned her back. She pulled aside the torn fabric, exposing the gold and crimson dragon that marked her lineage. The light caught the scales like fire across water. Ryu froze. The cherry blossoms, he whispered. Only you carried that mark. By father's decree, she said, to honor our mother's bloodline. Kazuo's voice trembled. It's her, Takashi-sama's daughter, I swear it. For a moment, none of them spoke. The air between brother and sister was heavy with grief and recognition, and something more complicated. 5 years of betrayal neither had chosen, but both had suffered for. Finally, Ryu exhaled. The fight seemed to drain out of him. Then the fire, everything I've done since, was based on lies, she said, finishing for him. He nodded once slowly, then we fix it. She blinked, just like that. Ryu's eyes met hers, steady now. If you're truly back, then we start again, together. It was the first time in years she'd heard him sound like her brother. Not the ruthless Yakuza heir the world feared, but the boy who used to spar with her in the garden, laughing through bruises. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed that sound. Kazuo cleared his throat softly. Young master, there are men outside. Masato's car arrived 10 minutes ago. He waits in the street. Ryu's expression hardened again. Then we move quickly. Eiko, you can't stay here, not after tonight. She nodded. There's a safe house in Meguro. Kazuo knows where. Ryu looked to the old guard. See her there safely. I'll keep things calm here. We meet in 2 days. Eiko turned toward the back exit but paused when he spoke again, his voice low. Why didn't you come to me sooner? She looked back. In his eyes she saw exhaustion, guilt, and something like hope. Because I didn't know if you were still my brother, she said quietly. Now I do. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, 2 lives, broken and realigning. Then she nodded once and left through the kitchen, Kazuo following close behind. Outside, rain still fell, thin, steady lines tracing down the alley walls. The air smelled of smoke and gun oil. Somewhere behind her, the Himura name was being whispered again, with disbelief, with awe, with fear. She didn't look back. The waitress named Izumi Katagawa disappeared into the rain. And the daughter of the dragon walked out in her place. How do you reclaim a life you buried? The rain followed her all the way to Meguro, a thin, cold whisper against the car windows, tracing patterns in the glass like the ghosts of forgotten years. Eiko sat in silence beside Kazuo, the city lights sliding over her face in passing flashes. Tokyo looked different from this side of the glass, sharper somehow, more alive. Or maybe it was her that had changed. For 5 years, she'd walked the same streets as a shadow. Now every flicker of neon felt like an accusation. Kazuo drove without speaking, his old hand steady on the wheel. She could see the tension in the set of his jaw, the unspoken disbelief still clinging to him. She had expected questions about how she survived, how she'd stayed hidden, how she'd found her way back. But Kazuo had served her family long enough to understand that some answers had to wait. When the car finally stopped, it was in front of a narrow apartment building on a quiet residential street. The kind of place no one looked at twice, paint peeling from the balconies, curtains drawn tight. Kazuo turned off the engine and faced her. "This place is secure," he said. "I've kept it maintained under one of your old aliases. No one knows it exists except me." She nodded, her gratitude unspoken but understood. Together they climbed the narrow stairwell to the top floor. Inside, the apartment was small, one room, a kitchenette, a worn sofa, a desk by the window, but it was clean, quiet, safe. Kazuo set her small travel bag on the table. "You should rest, young miss. You've been through enough tonight." Eiko's lips curved faintly. "Rest," she echoed. "After 5 years of pretending to be dead, after watching my brother's men spill blood for a lie." Kazuo hesitated, then bowed slightly. "As you wish. I'll bring food, supplies, and the documents you asked me to keep hidden." She turned toward the window, watching the rain fall through the yellow glow of the street lamp. "Tomorrow," she said softly. "We start tomorrow." When he left, the apartment seemed to exhale, filling with the faint hum of distant traffic. She crossed to the mirror by the door and looked at herself again. Gone was Izumi Katagawa, the woman who moved silently through other people's lives. What stared back now was neither waitress nor princess, but something in between, a survivor. She unbuttoned her blouse, revealing the dragon again. The ink gleamed faintly in the lamplight. Once she had hated it. Now it felt like armor. Her fingers traced the pattern: gold scales, soft cherry petals, the mark of her father's lineage. His voice echoed in her memory. "Power is not in being feared, Eiko. It's in knowing when to be silent and when to strike." For 5 years she had lived the silence. Now came the strike. Morning came gray and wet. The city below carried on as if nothing had changed, unaware that one woman's return could reshape the balance of power that held its underworld together. Kazuo arrived just after sunrise, carrying a small lockbox and 2 cups of steaming tea. He set them on the table and waited for her to sit. His movements were slow but precise, the habits of a lifetime spent serving a family where mistakes had consequences measured in blood. Eiko opened the box. Inside were neatly organized stacks of documents, hard drives and photographs, 5 years worth of secrets she had collected while living as a ghost, financial ledgers, surveillance notes, names and dates. The life's work of a woman no one thought existed. Kazuo watched her silently. "You gathered all this while serving drinks." "Men talk when they believe they're invisible," she said, her voice distant. "They talk about shipments, payoffs, hidden accounts. They talk about loyalty, even as they sell it. And they never think the woman pouring their whiskey is listening." Kazuo gave a small, respectful nod. "Your father would have been proud. You've inherited his patience." Her eyes softened at the mention. "Patience," she murmured, "or cowardice. Sometimes I'm not sure which." He didn't argue. Old loyalty had taught him when silence was more respectful than comfort. Eiko spent the morning sorting through evidence, laying it out like puzzle pieces. Every paper, every photo, another fragment of a larger betrayal. Bank transfers under shell corporations, payments routed through offshore accounts, witness statements from guards who had disappeared weeks after giving them. Each one pointed back to the same name, Masato Ashiro. He'd been her father's most trusted advisor, the man who guided her brother after the fire, who whispered counsel that always seemed to lead toward more violence, more blood. She remembered his face, calm, polite, with the kind of smile that could hide a dagger behind it. The fire had taken everything, her father, her inheritance, her name, and Masato had watched it all burn. Now she finally had the proof, but proof alone wouldn't be enough. In the Yakuza world, truth meant nothing without the right witnesses, without ritual, without power behind it. Ryu would need to see it for himself, so would the elders. She paused, her gaze falling on one particular photo, an image she had risked her life to obtain. Masato meeting with a representative of the Nakamura clan just weeks after the fire. Both men smiling, shaking hands. The date stamp burned into the corner, 2 days after her father's funeral. The betrayal had been complete even then. Her hands tightened around the photo until the edges bent. "You destroyed him," she whispered to the empty room, "but you won't destroy me." Kazuo's voice broke the silence. "You'll need protection, young miss. Masato has eyes everywhere." "I don't need protection," she said quietly. "I need justice." There was something in her tone, calm, final, that made the old man bow his head in acceptance. That night sleep refused to come. She lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the city breathe through the rain. Her mind replayed the fire, the sound of explosions, the heat, the choking smoke. The way her father's voice had sounded the last time she heard it, urgent, commanding her to run. She had run, and in running she'd lived. But living wasn't the same as being alive. She sat up, restless, and walked to the desk. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the world glistening and still. She could see her reflection faintly in the glass, half-light, half-shadow. "Izumi Katagawa," she whispered to it, testing the name that had protected her for half a decade. "You did your job." Then she let the silence that followed become a burial. From now on, there would only be a Kiko Himura. The knock came just before dawn, 3 measured taps, Kazuo's signal. She opened the door and he entered quickly, closing it behind him. "Your brother sends word," he said. "Masato returns from Yokohama tomorrow. The council meets the day after. He's arranged for you to be brought to the compound that morning." Eiko nodded, her pulse steady. "Then we have 1 night left." "1 night for what?" "For preparation," she said, "and for saying goodbye to the woman who didn't exist." She spent the next hours in focused silence, reviewing her notes, memorizing key dates and accounts. Every piece of evidence had to be watertight. Every lie she'd lived now turned into leverage. At dawn, she burned what remained of Izumi's life, her ID card, her uniform, the name tag that had hung around her neck like a chain. The smoke curled upward, thin and gray, like a spirit finally released. Kazuo watched her quietly. "Are you ready, young miss?" She turned toward him. "I've been ready for 5 years." The drive to the Himura compound took place under a sky washed clean by rain. The city's noise faded behind them, replaced by the quiet rhythm of tires over wet asphalt. As the car approached the gates, memories came unbidden, the smell of incense during New Year prayers, her father's deep laughter echoing through the courtyard, her brother sparring with her beneath the cherry trees until they both collapsed in laughter and exhaustion. She had thought those memories lost to fire. Now they felt like promises waiting to be kept. The rebuilt compound rose ahead, all wood and stone and tradition, reborn from ashes just as she had been. Guards in dark suits bowed as the car rolled through. Whispers followed her, disbelief turning to recognition as news of her return spread faster than breath. Ryu waited at the entrance, dressed in a formal kimono bearing the Himura crest. His face was composed, but his eyes betrayed something softer, pride, maybe, or relief. "Eiko," he said quietly as she stepped out, "welcome home." For a moment, neither spoke. The courtyard was silent except for the rustling of cherry blossoms overhead. "I never thought I'd see this place again," she said. "Nor did I," he replied, "but perhaps some things refuse to stay buried." He led her inside, through corridors that smelled of polished wood and incense. Every step felt like walking through memories. The servants bowed deeply as they passed, eyes wide with awe. To them she was legend, the lost princess, returned from death. In her father's old study, now restored, documents had been laid out with ritual precision. 4 elders of the clan knelt in silence, their expressions carefully neutral. Ryu gestured for her to kneel beside him. When the eldest spoke, his voice trembled slightly. "We buried Akiko Himura 5 years ago. Explain this miracle." She bowed deeply as tradition demanded. "The fire was meant to kill me. It failed. I have spent these years gathering truth from the shadows." And then she showed them the ledgers, the statements, the photographs. One by one, she placed them on the tatami mats like offering plates before a shrine. Each piece of evidence, a prayer for justice. The elders leaned forward, eyes narrowing as the puzzle formed. When she finished, silence filled the room again, thick, heavy, absolute. At last, the eldest elder spoke. "If what you say is true, then Masato Ashiro has betrayed not only the Himura bloodline, but the code of our ancestors." Eiko met his gaze without flinching. "Then tomorrow, let him face both." Ryu nodded beside her. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice low, "we end this." That night, Eiko stood alone in the garden behind the compound, the cherry trees swaying gently in the night breeze. Their petals drifted down like slow rain, gathering in the still water of the koi pond. 5 years ago, she had fled through this same garden as flames devoured the house behind her. She could still hear the crackle, the shouting, her father's voice calling her name through the smoke. Now the fire burned again, not in destruction but in her veins. The dragon had slept long enough. She looked up at the stars, her voice a whisper. "Father, tomorrow I'll finish what you started." The wind stirred, scattering blossoms across the stones. Somewhere deep inside, she felt the answer not in words but in certainty. Justice was coming. What does justice look like when you finally hold it in your hands? A blade, a sentence, or silence strong enough to make a traitor tremble. Morning arrived too quickly. The sky over the Himura compound was washed in pale gold, cherry blossoms trembling under a thin breeze. Inside, preparations moved like clockwork, servants lighting incense, guards adjusting their earpieces, the slow, rhythmic creak of floorboards as the elders took their seats one by one. Eiko dressed in silence. The formal kimono laid out for her was black, the silk heavy and smooth beneath her fingers, embroidered with a single golden dragon coiled across the hem, restrained, dignified, powerful. Kazuo helped tie the final sash, his hands trembling only once. "Are you certain, young miss?" he asked softly. "There is still time to step back." She met his eyes in the mirror. "Step back." Her reflection smiled, a hard, calm smile. "I spent 5 years hiding behind a tray and a name that wasn't mine. Today I stand." He bowed his head, acceptance in the motion. "Then the ancestors walk with you." When she left her room, the corridors seemed longer than she remembered, the weight of memory pressing down with every step. Servants stopped and bowed low, whispers following her like wind through reeds. "The princess lives. The bloodline endures." At the end of the hall waited Ryu, his posture impeccable in a dark kimono marked by the same crest. He studied her for a heartbeat, pride flickering in his usually stoic face. "You look like father," he murmured. She returned the faintest smile. "Let's hope I think like him too." Together they walked to the council hall. The sliding doors opened with a low sigh, revealing the assembled elders kneeling in precise formation, their attendants arrayed behind them. Candles burned at each corner, their smoke curling upward in thin white ribbons. The air smelled of sandalwood and tension. When Eiko stepped across the threshold, the murmuring ceased. Dozens of eyes lifted toward her, eyes that had once mourned her, that now struggled to comprehend her return. The eldest elder inclined his head. "Akiko Himura," he announced formally, "daughter of Takashi Himura, heir of the Golden Dragon, you stand before the council to present the truth of the fire." She bowed, every movement measured. "I do." Ryu took his place at her right hand. The arrangement itself was a message, brother and sister united, tradition rewritten in real time. "Summon him," Ryu ordered. A guard stepped out through the side door. Moments later, footsteps echoed across the polished floor. Masato Ashiro entered like a man walking into a meeting he expected to control. His tailored suit fit perfectly. His silver-streaked hair was combed with the precision of habit. He bowed, first to the elders, then to Ryu. When his gaze reached Eiko, it faltered for the briefest second: confusion, then calculation. "This is unexpected," he said smoothly. "A remarkable resemblance, but we buried Akiko Himura. Who is this woman?" "The woman you tried to kill," Eiko replied. The words struck like a blade drawn in a silent room. A few of the younger guards shifted uneasily. Masato recovered with practiced grace, forcing a faint smile. "A bold claim. Perhaps grief plays tricks on memory." "The council has verified her identity," said the eldest elder. "The family seal, the markings, the jade insignia of Takashi Himura. There is no doubt." Masato's eyes flicked from face to face, gauging how much ground he had lost. Then he bowed again, deeper this time. "Then I rejoice," he said. "Our family is blessed. To have the princess return from death itself is an omen of prosperity." Ryu's tone was ice. Prosperity built on ashes, perhaps. Eiko opened the folder in front of her. Paper whispered like wings. "These," she said, "are records of payments made from an account under the name Maida Consulting. 3 transfers totaling 800 million yen to a mercenary group specializing in arson." Masato's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I fail to see relevance. Maida Consulting handles numerous contracts." "Indeed," Eiko replied softly, "including the contract that burned our compound." She slid another document across the floor toward him. "Your wife's maiden name is Maida. The shell company is registered to her personal address in Osaka." The hall went still. Masato glanced at the page but didn't reach for it. His jaw twitched once, the only crack in an otherwise perfect mask. Ryu leaned forward slightly. "We also recovered witness statements, guards who saw you leaving father's study minutes before the fire began." "Lies," Masato snapped, his composure faltering. "Old men confusing memory." Before he could continue, Kazuo stepped aside to reveal a woman waiting just outside the door. She entered hesitantly, middle-aged, dressed in conservative gray. Eiko inclined her head. "Tanaka Yuki, father's secretary." Masato's breath hitched. "Yuki, you were dismissed after the fire." "I resigned," she corrected quietly, "out of fear." "Tell the council what you witnessed," Eiko said. Yuki bowed, hands trembling. "That night Takashi-sama summoned Masato-san to discuss succession. The Oyabun declared his intention to name Akiko-sama as heir. Masato-san objected strongly. He warned that tradition would not tolerate a woman leading the clan. When dismissed, he said something I did not understand then. 'By morning,' he said, 'circumstance may demand another choice.'" A collective murmur rippled through the elders. Masato's face drained of color. "This is absurd," he said. "Senile recollection from a frightened woman." But his voice betrayed the strain. Ryu stood slowly, the motion deliberate. "I buried our father believing Nakamura set that fire. I waged a 5-year war because of you. Tell me, Masato, were his screams worth your ambition?" Masato's mask cracked completely. "You think you could have kept this family alive without me? The world respects strength, not sentiment. Takashi let emotion cloud his judgment. You would have followed him into ruin. I saved the Himura name." Eiko rose. The rustle of silk was louder than any shout. "You saved nothing," she said. "You murdered loyalty and called it strategy. You burned your honor for power." He sneered. "And now you would lead. A woman wearing tattoos meant for men. Our rivals will laugh until they see weakness bleed from your hands." "Then let them laugh," she said quietly. "I will still lead." Her calm cut deeper than fury. Masato's hand twitched toward his jacket. The guards saw it. Before the pistol cleared cloth, two of them moved, one kick, one twist, and the weapon clattered across the floor. Masato struggled once before being forced to his knees, breath ragged. Even then he spat defiance. "Do it," he hissed. "Finish it like your father never could. Spill blood to prove strength." Eiko stepped closer until their eyes met. "Death would free you," she said. "I prefer justice." She turned to the council. "For betrayal against the Himura bloodline and the code of the ancestors, I decree expulsion. His name, his rank, his mark, all stripped. He will live as nothing." A collective gasp filled the room. The punishment was ancient, worse than death. To be tattooless, nameless, exiled from the Brotherhood was to die slowly in shame. Masato's bravado collapsed. "You can't." "I already have," she said. Guards hauled him to his feet. As they dragged him toward the door, Eiko spoke one last time, voice low enough for him alone. "You feared a woman's leadership. Now you will watch it rebuild everything you destroyed." The doors closed behind him with a heavy thud. The hall exhaled. The eldest elder bowed his head. "Your judgment honors both wisdom and restraint. Takashi-sama would approve." Ryu looked at his sister, a mix of awe and exhaustion in his eyes. "You chose exile over blood." She met his gaze. "Killing him would make him a martyr. Living without a name will make him an example." Kazuo bowed deeply. "The clan has a leader again." Outside, the wind shifted, scattering petals across the courtyard. The sound of the river beyond the walls carried faintly through the open screens, calm, continuous, eternal. Eiko closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight settle. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost reflective. "Father always said dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Ryu smiled faintly, then today it roared. For the first time in years, Eiko allowed herself to breathe. The fire that had consumed her past had finally burned clean. What remained was purpose. Tomorrow there would be rebuilding, fractured alliances to mend, blood debts to settle, ghosts to lay to rest. But tonight, beneath the drifting cherry blossoms, the Himura clan had been reborn. What happens after vengeance is done? When the fire goes out, what's left to burn? The next morning the compound was strangely silent. The air felt different, lighter, but uncertain. Like a storm that had passed but left the earth too quiet, too still. Eiko walked through the main courtyard alone, her sandals brushing against fallen petals. The cherry blossoms above her were in full bloom now, soft and unreal against the pale sky, beauty thriving over ground that had once been ash. She paused at the koi pond, watching the orange and white bodies glide beneath the surface. They had been her father's, descendants of the same fish that had survived the fire when the pond cracked and refilled from rain. Survivors like her. Ryu found her there, his presence quiet but grounding. He looked exhausted, dark circles beneath his eyes, the weight of leadership settling on his shoulders. "They're already talking," he said softly. "Other clans, the press, even the police. Word spreads fast." "Let them talk," she said, not looking up. "We've lived in rumor for 5 years. Truth will take longer to reach them." He gave a humorless smile. "You sound like father." "That's what you used to say when you didn't want to admit I was right." He laughed once, short, surprised. "Maybe I've learned." They stood in silence for a moment, two shadows mirrored in the water. Finally, Ryu spoke again. "The elders want a public ceremony. They want you to reclaim the family name officially, make it clear that the Himura bloodline stands unbroken." Eiko exhaled slowly. "A ceremony," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "After everything, we return to rituals." "Rituals hold the clan together," he said. "They remind people what's sacred." She looked up at him. "Do they, or do they just make them feel like everything's still under control?" Ryu's smile faded. "You think we shouldn't do it?" "I think control is a lie," she said softly. "Father believed in honor, but honor without change is just tradition pretending to be truth." Her words lingered between them. For a long moment, Ryu didn't answer. Then he nodded, as if conceding a point he wasn't ready to voice. "Still," he said, "we need to show unity. The elders respect what they can see." "Then let them see this." She turned to face him fully. A brother and sister standing side by side, equal. His brow furrowed slightly. "Equal, you know they'll resist that." "Then they can resist. I didn't survive 5 years in silence to bow again." Ryu studied her for a long time, then smiled, a slow, proud thing that reached his eyes. Father would have been proud of that fire. She met his gaze, quiet but certain. "Then maybe I'm finally his daughter." By evening, the compound buzzed again with movement, preparations for the ceremony already underway. Lanterns strung along the veranda. Fresh tatami mats rolled out. Eiko watched from her father's study as servants carried trays of ink and paper for the calligrapher who would inscribe the new decree. Kazuo stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back. "The elders are cautious," he said. "Some think the punishment you gave Masato was too merciful. Others say it was too cruel." "That means it was right," Eiko said quietly. He smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but they will test you, young miss. You brought justice, now they will expect wisdom." Eiko's gaze drifted toward the courtyard, where 2 young recruits were practicing with wooden bakken. Their movements were eager but clumsy. She remembered training in that same yard years ago, Ryu's teasing laughter, her father's calm correction. Now all of it was memory and echo. "Wisdom," she said softly. "I thought I'd find it in silence, but silence taught me only how to survive, not how to lead." "Then speak," Kazuo said. "Your voice has weight now." She nodded once, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. After a moment she asked, "What of Masato?" "He was taken out of the city last night," Kazuo said. "The elders sent him to live under exile in the north. He will not return." Eiko turned away from the window. "Let him live long enough to understand what he destroyed." Kazuo bowed, "As you command." When he left, the room grew still again. The silence pressed in, but this time, it wasn't the peace she'd imagined. It was the quiet that comes before new storms. That night, as the ceremony began, the courtyard glowed with soft amber light. Rows of candles flickered beside the koi pond. The air smelled of incense and spring blossoms. Dozens of faces, elders, guards, family allies, filled the space. Whispers hushed when Eiko appeared, walking across the bridge that divided the courtyard. She moved like someone who had stopped pretending to be small. Her black kimono trailed behind her, embroidered dragon glinting gold under the lantern light. Every eye followed her, some in awe, some in doubt. Ryu stood waiting beside the altar, where a scroll lay open, ink ready. When she reached him, he handed her the brush. She hesitated for half a second, not from fear, but from the weight of memory. "This ink," she murmured. "Father used it the night he signed his last treaty." Ryu nodded. "Then let it witness yours." Eiko dipped the brush and began to write. Her strokes were steady, deliberate. She wrote her full name, Akiko Himura, daughter of Takashi, rightful heir to the Golden Dragon. The brush moved like breath. When she finished, she set it down carefully. The eldest elder stepped forward. "By this mark," he declared, "the Himura bloodline stands renewed. The daughter returns. The clan endures." A murmur swept through the crowd, half reverence, half fear. Eiko looked out at them, her eyes steady. "You all lived through the fire," she said. "Some of you lost family, some of you lost faith. But I tell you this, the fire was not an ending. It was a cleansing. What burned were lies. What remains is truth." Her voice was calm, not loud, yet it carried across the courtyard. "We will rebuild not on fear, not on tradition alone, but on honor that remembers compassion. No more shadows, no more silence." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then slowly, one by one, they bowed. Ryu was the last to bow, and when he did, it was not as a superior, but as a brother honoring his equal. The moment felt fragile, beautiful, real. Later, after the guests had dispersed, Eiko remained by the pond. The candles burned low, their light dancing on the water. She could still hear distant voices, laughter, footsteps, the sounds of life returning to a place that had been haunted for years. Ryu approached quietly, carrying 2 small cups of sake. He handed her one and sat beside her on the wooden bridge. "To father," he said. She raised her cup, "To truth." They drank, the sake burned warm, clean. After a long silence, he said, "You did it, you brought us back." She looked down at the reflection of the lanterns rippling across the water. "Did I?" she asked. "Or did I just make us visible again?" "What's the difference?" "Visibility means they can see us," she said softly, "but it also means they can aim at us." He smiled faintly. "You've always been paranoid." "Cautious," she corrected. "There's a difference." A small laugh escaped him. "You sound like him again." She didn't answer. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was understanding, the kind that didn't need words. After a while, Ryu stood, brushing off his robe. "Tomorrow we meet with the Shindo family, old allies. They'll want to test your resolve, expect pressure." "I'm ready," she said. He nodded. "You always were." When he left, Eiko stayed by the pond, her reflection flickering with the last of the lantern light. The dragon on her kimono glimmered like something alive, its gold threads catching the glow. She thought of her father, of the night he'd taught her the meaning of that mark. "You will not be loved for this, Eiko," he'd said, "but if you bear it with grace, one day you will be respected, and that will be enough." She had never believed him then, but tonight she understood. Respect wasn't given, it was earned piece by painful piece. She closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she wasn't hiding from the past. She was standing in it, reshaping it, turning it into something that might outlive her. Above her, petals drifted across the pond like tiny boats, fragile, fleeting, but still afloat. Sometimes, she thought, rebirth doesn't come from flames at all. Sometimes it comes from still water. But even as peace settled over the compound, the shadows beyond the gates began to stir. Not everyone was ready to accept a woman leading the Himura clan. Not everyone believed the fire's embers were truly out. Far from the city, in a small coastal town, a man in exile sat before a cracked mirror. Masato Ashiro's reflection stared back at him, hollow-eyed, stripped of tattoos, stripped of name. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands and smiled bitterly. "You think it's over, princess," he muttered to the empty room. "You've only rebuilt the stage. The real play hasn't begun." He crushed the cigarette, leaving a long, dark smear on the table. Outside, waves crashed against the shore, steady, inevitable, the sound of something gathering strength. Back in Tokyo, Eiko stood alone beneath the cherry blossoms, the wind tugging at her sleeves. She couldn't know what was coming, not yet, but a part of her, deep down, already sensed it. Because peace in her world never lasted long. Every peace has a price. Some just take longer to show the bill. 3 weeks had passed since the ceremony. The cherry blossoms had begun to fall, leaving the branches bare again, as if the world itself refused to hold beauty for long. Eiko stood on the veranda of her father's study, watching the petals drift down onto the courtyard stones. Below, the new recruits trained under the morning sun, their movements sharper, more disciplined than before. Order was returning. Control. But something in her chest still felt uneasy. Kazuo approached quietly, bowing before he spoke. "The Shindo delegation will arrive within the hour, young miss." She nodded, eyes still on the courtyard. "Ryu will handle the introduction." "Yes, though they requested to speak with you directly." "Of course they did," she murmured. "They want to see if the rumors are true, if a woman can carry the Himura crest without faltering." Kazuo hesitated. "Will you show them?" She turned to him. "The tattoo." He nodded. Eiko considered. "No, not yet. Power doesn't come from what you reveal, Kazuo. It comes from what you choose to keep hidden. He bowed. Then they'll learn to fear what they cannot see. A faint smile touched her lips. Exactly. The Shindo convoy arrived just before noon, black sedans rolling through the gates like a quiet threat. Men in tailored suits stepped out, their posture too relaxed to be anything but deliberate. At their head was Shindo Noboru, a man of influence and careful speech. His gray hair was slicked back, his gold watch catching sunlight with every gesture. Ryu met them at the entrance, formal and composed. Eiko stood beside him, a calm center amid the unease. Shindo-san, Ryu greeted. The Himura clan welcomes you. Shindo smiled thinly. It's good to see the name endure. We were beginning to think tradition itself had turned to smoke. Eiko inclined her head slightly. Sometimes, smoke hides what needs to survive. His eyes flicked to her, assessing, measuring. You must be the fabled sister, the one who rose from ashes. Rumors exaggerate, she said calmly. I didn't rise, I just refused to stay buried. The man chuckled softly. Perhaps that's worse. They walked together through the courtyard toward the meeting hall. The air carried the scent of tea and rain-soaked wood. Guards stood at discreet intervals, watchful but invisible. Inside, the atmosphere thickened with formality. Tea was poured, polite phrases exchanged. Beneath every word, the real conversation played out in pauses, in glances, in what was not said. Shindo leaned back slightly, studying her. You handled the Masato situation with elegance. Most would have chosen blood. Blood stains too easily, she replied. Exile stains the soul. Still, he said, swirling his tea, some in our world might interpret mercy as weakness. She smiled faintly. Then they haven't learned what it costs. He met her gaze for a long moment, then nodded, as if conceding a point he hadn't expected to lose. The balance of Tokyo is shifting, he said finally. The old families watch you. Some admire, some wait. The Nakamura remain quiet, too quiet. Eiko's tone stayed even. Quiet isn't peace, it's strategy. Ryu added, we're strengthening our alliances. Rebuilding trade lines, protection networks, will be ready. Shindo smiled again, but there was something colder in it now. Readiness isn't the same as loyalty. Be careful whom you trust. He set his cup down gently, the sound louder than expected in the hush of the hall. Then he stood, offered a short bow, and left with his entourage. When the gates closed behind them, Ryu exhaled slowly. That man's words always sound like advice but smell like warning. Eiko's eyes followed the departing cars. He's testing us. Everyone is. Kazuo stepped forward. Shall I send a watcher? She nodded. Two, quiet ones, the kind who don't return unless they must. Kazuo bowed and disappeared through the side hall. Ryu turned to her. You spoke well. I spoke truth, she said simply, but truth doesn't always survive politics. He gave a dry smile. Then we make sure ours does. That night the compound glowed with candlelight. Eiko stood alone in her father's study again, reviewing reports. The ledger of alliances, new recruits, shipment routes, every line a thread holding the fragile web of peace together. Her mind should have been at ease. Instead, it raced. Kazuo's words from earlier echoed back. They'll test you. And Shindo's, be careful whom you trust. She set the papers down and crossed to the window. Beyond the walls, the city lights stretched like constellations. Each one a secret, a transaction, a life bound to hers by invisible lines. It was a kingdom without a crown, and yet every choice she made would shape its fate. The knock came soft but urgent. Enter, she said. A young guard stepped inside, bowing quickly. Forgive me, Himura-sama. We found one of our men outside the western gate, dead. Her expression didn't change, but the silence that followed was heavy. How? Gunshot clean, professional, no witnesses. Whose unit? Recon. one of the men Kazuo sent to follow Shindo. Eiko's pulse slowed instead of quickened, the kind of stillness that comes before lightning. Where's the other? Missing. She looked out the window again, eyes distant. Then we've been noticed. Ryu appeared moments later, already armed, already alert. You heard. She nodded. They're moving faster than expected. He cursed under his breath. It's Nakamura, isn't it? Maybe, she said. Or maybe Shindo plays both sides. He stepped closer. What's your move? Her tone was calm. We wait, then we strike where they don't expect with words first, then steal if needed. You still think words will save us? She turned to him, meeting his gaze evenly. No, but they'll give us the right to draw steel. He smiled faintly. You always find poetry in war. It's the only way to stay human. 2 nights later, the answer came. Kazuo returned at midnight, his clothes damp with rain, his breath visible in the cold. We found the second man, he said. Alive, but barely. He crawled halfway back before collapsing. Can he speak? Eiko asked. Kazuo nodded grimly. Enough. They moved to the infirmary. The air smelled of antiseptic and incense. The wounded guard lay pale and shaking, bandages wrapped around his chest. When he saw Eiko, he tried to sit up. Stay down, she said gently. Just tell me what you saw. His lips trembled. Shindo's men met with outsiders, not Nakamura, foreigners, black suits, military precision. They spoke English, something about shipments, about nanotech. Ryu frowned. Nanotech. Experimental weapons, Eiko murmured. Smuggled tech, it's bigger than territory now. The guard's breathing quickened. They mentioned your name, said, the girl doesn't know yet. Then his eyes rolled back. The monitors flatlined. Ryu swore under his breath. He died for a whisper. Eiko stood motionless. Then she whispered almost to herself, the girl doesn't know yet. Ryu turned to her. Know what? She didn't answer immediately. Her mind raced through memories, things overheard during her years as Izumi, half-remembered conversations about experimental shipments moving through Tokyo's underworld. She had dismissed them as rumor. But now. 5 years ago, she said slowly, before the fire, Father met with a private defense contractor. He said they offered him something dangerous. He refused. He said it didn't belong in our world. Ryu frowned. En Masado. He wanted to accept. He saw profit where Father saw peril. She turned toward him, eyes sharp. If Shindo's involved with the same people, then Masato wasn't working alone. He was following orders maybe from outside Japan. Ryu's jaw tightened. Then we're dealing with more than betrayal. This is foreign interference. Exactly, she said. And if they're bringing weapons into Tokyo, then every family is at risk. Kazuo's voice broke the silence. What will you do, young miss? Eiko's tone was low, steady. What I've always done, survive first, then protect the ones who can't. By dawn, the compound had changed again. Guards doubled, patrols silent, shadows sharper than before. The koi pond rippled in the wind, the blossoms gone now, leaving only bare branches over still water. Eiko stood there again, watching her reflection. The woman who looked back no longer seemed uncertain, but there was something else in her eyes now, the awareness that she was standing at the edge of something much larger than her family's feud. Ryu joined her quietly. You think this is why Father died? She nodded slowly. Not because of power, because he said no to someone who didn't like hearing it. Ryu's hands tightened at his sides. Then we find out who they are. We will, she said, but we do it carefully, the storm's coming again. He looked out at the horizon, where the first light of morning touched the city's skyline. And when it does. She smiled faintly, calm, steady. Then the dragon wakes again. The wind stirred, carrying the faintest scent of rain. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, low, patient, inevitable. The world thought the Himura fire had ended 5 years ago. They were wrong. It was just beginning to burn again. How deep does betrayal go when it's not about family anymore, but nations? The rain returned the next night. Not the gentle kind that healed the air, but the cold, heavy sheets that turned streets into mirrors and secrets into silhouettes. Tokyo glowed under it, lights bleeding across wet pavement, the hum of traffic swallowed by thunder. Somewhere in that labyrinth of reflections, the truth was moving. Quietly, patiently. And Akiko Himura was done waiting. In her father's old office, maps covered the wall, trade routes, shipping manifests, surveillance photographs. Eiko stood before them, tracing a line with her finger from Tokyo Bay, through Yokohama, across the water to Okinawa, a smuggling path disguised as cargo transfers. Kazuo sat nearby, his glasses low on his nose as he read through a newly decoded file. "The missing shipments," he murmured, "all trace back to one company, Larkin Industries, registered in Singapore, shell subsidiaries everywhere." "American," Eiko said softly, "private defense contractor. My father refused to deal with them. Masato must have taken their offer instead." Ryu entered the room then, rain still clinging to his shoulders. "Our contacts at the docks confirm movement tonight. Crates unloaded under false manifests. If we move now, we can intercept." Kazuo looked up sharply. "Intercepting a foreign shipment, that's war, young master." Ryu's jaw tightened. "So is smuggling weapons into Tokyo under our nose." Eiko turned from the map. "We'll go." Ryu hesitated. "Eiko." "You said yourself," she cut in, "we're dealing with something bigger. If we send others, they'll tip off whoever's watching. We go quietly. We see what's coming into our city." Kazuo's voice lowered. "Then at least take backup." She gave him a calm look. "You're my backup, old friend." He sighed, then nodded, because he knew he couldn't stop her. The docks were a city of steel and shadow. Rain drummed against shipping containers, their numbers glowing faintly under security lights. Forklifts moved like ghosts between aisles. Beyond them, cranes loomed over the harbor, silent giants holding their breath. Eiko moved through the maze with Ryu and Kazuo, dressed in black, the rain slicking her hair against her neck. Every movement was calculated, every sound measured. They had lived their lives in shadows. Now they were walking through one larger than any they'd ever known. They reached the main storage bay, a massive structure lit by cold, fluorescent light. From inside came the faint echo of machinery. Men shouted orders in English and Japanese. Eiko crouched behind a stack of crates, peering through a gap. "Look there," she whispered. Three men in suits stood near a container marked with the Larkin Industries logo, stylized wings around a black triangle. One of them handed a folder to another. Lightning flashed, illuminating their faces for a heartbeat. Ryu stiffened. "That's Shindo's lieutenant." Eiko's voice was steady. "So Shindo's playing with fire." "And the others?" Ryu asked. Her gaze lingered on the tall, broad-shouldered foreigner standing beside him, pale eyes, close-cropped hair, military bearing even out of uniform. "Former soldier," she murmured. "American. He's not a smuggler, he's a handler." Kazuo whispered, "What's in the containers?" "Let's find out." They moved quietly along the shadows until they reached a maintenance door. Ryu picked the lock in seconds. Inside, the warehouse stretched like a cathedral of steel. Rows of crates towered over them, each marked with barcodes and coded numbers. Eiko brushed her fingers across one, feeling the chill of the metal. "Scan it," she told Kazuo. He pulled a small handheld reader from his coat. The device beeped, then displayed the tag's metadata. Kazuo frowned. "Medical equipment," he read, "but the weight's wrong, far too heavy." "Open it," Eiko said. Ryu pried the latch loose. The crate opened with a hiss, revealing sleek, black canisters stacked in foam padding. Each was labeled with a warning in multiple languages: biosynthetic repair fluid, classified prototype. Kazuo's eyes widened. This isn't a weapon. It's experimental nanotech self-repair serum, military grade. Ryu stared. They're bringing this into Tokyo. Eiko touched one of the canisters, her fingers hovering over the warning symbols. No, she said softly. They're testing it here. Before she could say more, a voice echoed from behind them. Well, look, who decided to visit the graveyard. They spun around. Shindo Noboru stepped out of the shadows, flanked by armed men, and beside him, the American handler. Rainwater dripped from his coat as he smiled. Curiosity kills, Miss Himura, Shindo said pleasantly. I would have preferred to keep our friendship formal. Eiko's eyes were cold. You don't have friends, Shindo, you have customers. Ryu took a step forward. You're moving foreign military tech through our territory. You think Tokyo will look away. The American spoke then, his Japanese fluent but edged with an accent. Tokyo won't know. By the time anyone notices, this tech will be in hospitals, labs, even militaries. Everyone will want it. Everyone will pay. Eiko's gaze sharpened, and you'll own them. He smiled faintly. Not me, just the company. Larkin builds the future, Miss Himura. We're offering you a place in it. Ryu scoffed. You burn families, poison streets, and call it progress. Your father thought the same, the man said, his tone colder now. And look where it got him. Eiko's breath caught just a fraction, but it was enough. You were there. I was there, he said, advising your dear Masato when he made the right choice. You were supposed to die in that fire, but fate likes irony. Ryu lunged, but Eiko's hand stopped him. Her voice was steady. You killed my father because he said no. Because he stood in the way of evolution, the man corrected. We're beyond nations now, beyond codes. You can resist or you can adapt. Adapt, she repeated softly. That's what cowards call surrender. Shindo gestured lazily, and the guards raised their guns. End this. But Eiko was already moving. The first shot rang out, silenced, precise. Kazuo's pistol found one guard's chest before the others reacted. Ryu dropped the next with a knee strike and twist, using his own momentum to disarm a second. The warehouse erupted into chaos, the echo of suppressed gunfire mixing with thunder. Eiko rolled behind a crate, drawing her weapon. Her movements were fluid, years of suppressed training resurfacing like instinct. 2 shots, 2 men down. She moved like someone born for shadows. Shindo ducked behind a forklift, shouting orders. The American handler pulled a compact rifle from his coat, firing in short, controlled bursts. Sparks lit the air as bullets struck metal. Kazuo went down with a cry hit in the shoulder. Eiko turned instinctively. Kazuo. I'm fine, he gritted. Finish it. Ryu shouted. Eiko left flank. She moved low, fast, precise, and closed the distance to the handler. He turned just in time to meet her strike. They clashed, his strength against her speed, his training against her fury. He caught her wrist. She broke free, drove a knee into his ribs. The gun fell. She leveled hers at his chest. Who ordered my father's death? She demanded. He smiled, blood on his teeth. You already know. She fired once. The shot dropped him instantly. The echo lingered longer than the thunder. When it faded, Shindo was gone. Ryu cursed, scanning the rows. He ran. Let him, Eiko said, lowering her gun. He'll lead us to whoever still paying him. Kazuo leaned against a crate, blood soaking his sleeve. The tech, and what will you do with it? Eiko looked at the open container, the black canisters gleaming faintly under the light. We destroy it. Ryu frowned. You sure this could change medicine industry? It already changed death, she said coldly. It burned our family alive. Some things aren't meant to be owned. She tossed a flare into the open crate. The fire caught quickly, burning with an eerie blue hue. The smoke rose thick and chemical, filling the air with the smell of ozone and ash. Ryu watched the flames spread, the light reflecting in his eyes. "Father said the same words once," he murmured. "Maybe you are his daughter after all." Aiko's expression softened briefly. "No," she said quietly. "I'm what his world turned me into." They helped Kazuo to his feet, moving quickly as the fire began to consume the rows of crates. Sirens wailed in the distance, too late to matter. As they slipped into the rain-soaked night, Aiko glanced back once at the burning warehouse. Blue fire reflected in her eyes like memory. The past was no longer chasing her. Now she was chasing it. Hours later, back at the compound, Kazuo lay resting under the care of the clan physician. Ryu leaned against the doorway, silent. Aiko stood by the window, arms folded, her gaze far away. "He was right about one thing," she said finally. "This isn't just about family, it's bigger, global." Ryu nodded slowly, and Shindo. "He'll surface again. Men like him always do, but now we know what they're carrying." Ryu's voice dropped. "And if the others, the Americans, the contractors, come looking?" She looked out at the dawn breaking over Tokyo. "Then they'll find more than they expected." Her reflection in the glass was steady, her eyes unflinching. The dragon tattoo beneath her collarbone seemed to shift with every breath, alive again. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "They thought the fire killed the Himura bloodline. They were wrong. It forged it." Ryu smiled faintly. "Then what's next?" She turned from the window, her voice calm, resolute. "Now we take the fight to them." Outside, the storm began to fade. But beneath the surface, something new had begun to rise, a quiet war, invisible to the world, born not of greed or power, but of vengeance wrapped in honor. And this time, Aiko wouldn't be hiding. Some wars end with gunfire. Others end in silence, the kind that changes everything. 3 months later, the world had already forgotten the explosion at the Yokohama docks. Official reports called it an industrial accident. The truth, as always, disappeared beneath paperwork and ash. But in the shadows where governments and syndicates whispered, a name was being spoken again, Himura. Not as tragedy, not as myth. As warning. The Himura compound no longer felt like a house of mourning. It breathed again, alive with footsteps, with plans, with purpose. Men trained in the courtyard. New banners hung in the great hall. The dragon crest gleamed over the entrance once more. Aiko stood at her father's desk, reading through the latest reports. Her black kimono was simple, unadorned. Her hair tied back. A woman no longer hiding in anyone's story but her own. Ryu entered quietly, holding a folder. "Intercept from our contact in Singapore," he said. "Larkin moved its operations. They're relocating assets Geneva, Seoul, Los Angeles, but the real base is in Manila." She looked up, and Shindo. "Alive," Ryu said. "He's their bridge, Japanese face for foreign money, and he's meeting them there in 2 days." Aiko exhaled slowly. "Then we end this where it started." Ryu hesitated. "Manila is Tokyo, we'll have no allies there." She gave a faint smile. "Then we'll bring our own." 2 nights later, a private jet cut across the Pacific darkness. The city below spread like circuitry, Manila glowing in veins of gold and electric blue. Aiko sat by the window, the reflection of the stars glimmering over her eyes. Kazuo sat opposite her, his arms still in a sling but his composure steady. "I should have retired years ago," he muttered, half to himself. "But I suppose loyalty's a habit I never broke." "You could still walk away," Aiko said. He smiled faintly, "and miss the ending, never." Ryu chuckled quietly from the other seat. "Don't encourage him, sister. He'd drag himself through a war zone if you asked." "Then I won't ask," she said softly, "but I won't stop him either." Outside, lightning flashed far over the sea, brief, white, distant. A reminder of how small the plane was against the scale of the storm waiting below. They landed before dawn. Manila was waking, humid air, distant horns, the scent of salt and diesel. The team moved quickly, blending into the morning crowds. Their contact, a former Japanese intelligence officer turned fixer, met them at the pier. "You're walking into a nest," he warned, passing Aiko a file. "Larkin's not just a company, it's a front. Private contracts with defense ministries, biotech labs, off-books black projects. The man you killed at the docks, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, he wasn't rogue, he was command." Ryu's expression hardened. "Then we're hunting his superiors." The fixer nodded. "They're meeting tonight, private auction. Experimental nanofluid up for bid, same serum you destroyed in Yokohama. Every major buyer will be there, including Shindo." Aiko closed the file, eyes calm. "Where?" "An offshore facility disguised as a research lab. Guarded, tight security." Ryu smirked. "Good, wouldn't be worth it otherwise." By nightfall, the sea was black glass under the boat's prow. The facility rose out of the water like a mirage, white lights tracing its edges, motion sensors glinting faintly in the rain. Through binoculars, Aiko could see figures moving on the upper decks, men in suits, armed guards along the perimeter. Ryu adjusted his earpiece. "All right, we're ghosts tonight. In, out, no noise." Kazuo gave a dry laugh. "You say that every time." They moved, shadows on steel, rain muffling footsteps, the ocean swallowing every sound. Aiko scaled the ladder first, slipping silently onto the deck. Two guards stood near the entrance, bored, smoking. She moved behind them, silent as breath, two swift motions, two men down. No wasted movement, no hesitation. They entered through a side corridor lined with glass panels and humming machines. The air smelled sterile, cold. Inside one of the labs, blue canisters glowed faintly under UV lights, identical to those from the docks. But these were labeled version 2. Kazuo stared. "They improved it." Ryu's voice was low. "No, they weaponized it." Aiko's gaze lingered on a digital readout beside the tank. Nanofluid adaptive prototype, regenerative response to tissue loss. Successful. She whispered, healing turned into control. Then voices echoed from the next room, laughter, glass clinking, the low murmur of money talking to power. They followed the sound to an observation hall overlooking the sea. Dozens of people stood around a long glass table. Screens displayed graphs and holograms of human cells regenerating in seconds. And at the head of the room, smiling like a serpent in silk, was Shindo Naburu. He looked older now, thinner, but his confidence hadn't aged a day. "Gentlemen," he said, addressing the crowd in English, "this serum will change warfare, medicine, humanity itself. Why heal soldiers when you can rebuild them? Why fear death when it can be delayed?" Aiko stepped from the shadows, her voice cutting through the applause. "Because some things are meant to end." The room froze. Shindo turned slowly, disbelief flickering in his eyes. "You again," he said, voice trembling just slightly. "You don't know when to die." "I learned from men like you," she said, "the ones who never do." Ryu and Kazuo flanked her, weapons drawn. Chaos erupted, guards shouting, buyers scrambling for exits. Bullets shattered glass, alarms screamed. The facility shook as red lights bathed the hall. Shindo backed toward the console, fury twisting his face. "You can't stop it. The world wants this. You can't burn evolution." Aiko walked toward him, calm amid the chaos. "Evolution doesn't mean losing your soul." He reached for a pistol, but she was faster. A single shot, not to kill, but to disarm. The gun spun across the floor. Shindo clutched his bleeding hand, falling against the console. The impact triggered the lab's emergency protocol, containment breach. Sirens deepened, lights flashing blue. Through the observation window, one of the tanks cracked, fluid spilling across the floor. Kazuo shouted, "We have to go." But Aiko didn't move. She grabbed Shindo by the collar, pulling him upright. "Who gave the order?" she demanded. "Who killed my father?" Blood flecked his teeth as he laughed. You think it was me? I was just the delivery man. The order came from above from Larkin's board, but they don't sign their names, they sign in nations. She stared at him, realization hitting like thunder. Governments. He smiled weakly. You can't fight ghosts, princess. She let him go. He fell against the broken console, the alarms drowning his laughter. Flames erupted from the lower decks as fluid ignited. The heat rose fast, blinding. The firestorm of Yokohama reborn. Ryu grabbed her arm. Eiko now. They ran through corridors of smoke and sirens, the world behind them collapsing. Kazuo stumbled once but kept pace, clutching his wounded arm. The structure groaned, lights dying one by one. They burst onto the deck just as the first explosion tore through the lab. The shockwave threw them forward. The boat lurched away from the dock, fire reflecting off the rain and sea. From the distance, the facility looked like a burning star collapsing into itself, devouring what it created. Eiko stood at the bow, soaked, breathless, eyes fixed on the inferno. It's done, she whispered. Ryu nodded, for now. She turned to him, no, for good. Dawn broke over Manila like a slow confession. The sky was gray, the sea still. The smoke from the destroyed facility drifted across the horizon, fading into nothing. Kazuo sat beside the engine, pale but alive. We destroyed their product, he said quietly, but not the idea. Someone will rebuild it. Eiko's gaze was distant. Then we keep watching, and when they try again, we remind them some fires don't die quietly. Ryu leaned back, exhausted. You realize, sister, that you've just declared war on a ghost. She smiled faintly, then I'll become one. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Whatever comes next, Father would have been proud. Her voice softened. He believed power meant choosing what to protect, not what to destroy. Maybe I finally understand that. The sea stretched endless around them, quiet, vast, merciless. Eiko watched the horizon until the last smoke thread vanished. Then she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. I spent years pretending to be no one. Turns out that's how you learn what someone really is. Back in Tokyo, weeks later, rumors spread again. About a woman who dismantled a foreign weapons network. About the rebirth of a clan that refused to die. No one knew her name for sure. Some called her the Dragon's Daughter. Others, the Quiet Storm. But those who had seen her said the same thing. When she spoke, the room listened. And when she was silent, the world held its breath. In the courtyard of the rebuilt Himura compound, Eiko knelt beneath the cherry tree, the one her father had planted the year she was born. Its blossoms had returned again, pink and perfect against the morning light. She touched the trunk gently. It's over, she whispered, but not forgotten. Kazuo stood at a distance, watching her quietly. The council asks what comes next, he said softly, peace or preparation. She smiled faintly, both, always both. He nodded, bowing low. You've become what your father hoped you would be. No, she said, I became what the world made me, but maybe that's enough. The wind stirred, scattering petals across the stones. They fell around her like snow, fragile, beautiful, fleeting. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to simply breathe. Her story would be told in whispers of the waitress who wasn't what she seemed, the heir who survived fire, the woman who fought syndicates and soldiers alike without ever losing her calm. But if anyone ever asked her what she learned through it all, she would answer quietly. Strength doesn't roar. It endures. Then she'd pause, as if remembering something far away, and add. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The screen fades to black. Soft piano notes echo against the sound of falling rain. And in that silence, the dragon sleeps again.